La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
Get out the matrix and live.
You know what day it is? Inner Wealth Podcast. Meditate and give. So manifest the greater this. And things all good cause I say it is. Invest in your inner wealth. Real generational wealth is mental health. It's an inside game, no toxicity. Let's talk and more listening. Ladies and gentlemen, and now introducing David McCullar, founder of Inception, the first mental health gym.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
La 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 la.
Inner Wealth Podcast.
Get out the matrix and live.
One. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Inner Wealth Podcast. I got some special people in the building. Let me go first to my left. I got Mr. Kevin Johnson. Any relation with Kevin Johnson?
None at all, except we're both light-skinned brothers.
Okay.
That's about it.
So executive coach Kevin Johnson. And then across we have Ava St Claire, who's a spiritual advisor.
Indeed.
And then we got the mother of them all, the oracle, my mom, Tina Mccullar, social work, licensed master social work.
Yes.
Okay. What up, though, everybody?
What up, though?
Hello.
So we recently were featured on Comedy Central with Charlamagne, the God's Honest Truth show. And we had Chico Bean and Icewear Vezzo come in to experience Inception. And so today we're going to do a whole podcast just going really trying to, let's call it a review of the show or a reaction of the show and give our expertise and weigh in on everything that we saw, but also talk about and take the conversation, basically continue forward with the conversation because there's different layers and levels to it. So first I want to go to, obviously everybody watched the show, right?
Yes.
What are some of your thoughts just as a whole before we even go into any things specific? Not everybody at once.
Well, I particularly thought one of the outstanding moments was the doctor who shared his philosophy of embodying the trauma as part of culture. Mm-hmm. That the individual, when we are experiencing trauma, we get so normalized to it that we think it's our personality. And so we fuse the trauma to who we are, and it becomes a part of our identity. I thought that was truly powerful because that's what makes healing so hard. Because if healing means we begin to feel like we're losing ourselves, we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that becomes a natural resistance to transformation.
Well, you always heard those things. Well, that's just how I am, right? You've heard that before? When you challenge somebody on something, their behavior, and you're like, well, that's just how I am.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's not how you have to continue to be.
Yeah, yeah. There's a trope in coaching that points to historically, that's how you have been. How do you want to be?
Right.
Well, people say they don't know how they want to be. And when you say that, David, you was like saying, well, that's just how I am. And you can take the situation of someone that's been angry all of their lives. That anger may make them feel empowered. And Kevin, you were speaking about, but how are they going to be after they make shifts or changes? And that may put them in a vulnerable state. And that's something that frightens them.
Right. So I think that goes to that first question that they were asking when Dr. Rita, they after they saw Chico and Vezzo go through Inception, she was asking, he was like, okay, so what do you do after you went to Inception? And that's when she said, well, everybody has to kind of seek a professional. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had almost like a visceral reaction to that because it's part of a project that I've been working on. And she was telling the truth. It's like, you're going to go through 6 or 7 different, coaches or therapists or even modalities before you find the one that you're looking for. And I think in my journey, that was the most frustrating thing. And what I thought was happening for me was that I was just not finding the right person. But in some cases, like I was telling Kevin before, I felt like I could eat therapists for lunch, honestly, because they get in there, and my background in psychology at the time was just, I was chewing through coaches left and right and not realizing that what I needed was something much deeper. And so I think that sometimes people will go into therapy, which is great. And I found a couple of therapists and a coach that was really good for me. But after a while, I started to need other spiritual advisors who would do that heavy, like deep, rooted out from the weeds kind of work with me. That became my saving grace. Because after a while, the therapy and the coaching just was not, it wasn't getting to where I needed it to go. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have the chops, you can't coach me.
You can't. You just.
And I literally, if someone starts, using catchphrases or coachy kind of language, I'll just stop and say, hey, listen, I've been doing this for 23 years. Either you're going to call me out on my stuff or you're not. And if I'm selecting a coach, and I just started work with a coach maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I went through 3 coaches before I landed on the one that I'm working with, because I ran into that same thing. If I don't feel confronted by the person who's working with me, if they don't have the courage to challenge me on my stuff, then they can't really move me. And so I invoke that with anybody who's seeking support post-inception or seeking support post-realization of their trauma, that if the person in front of you that you're interviewing for care or psychiatric treatment or therapy or any kind of intervention isn't able to confront you in some way where you feel uncomfortable, then they're not the person. If you feel warm and fuzzy afterwards, they're probably not going to help you much. That's just my own personal lens on it. But that's if you really want to move.
But then my question goes into where you said, even Dr. Rita was talking about it's going to take you about 6 therapists. It's like, why is it taking you 6 therapists?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was more of a mismatch of values, which is hard to ask somebody who's already going through a lot to kind of sit down and write what those are. But I mean, if somebody can sit down and just write out their goals, even if it's not their deepest value systems, and then go looking for that coach or that therapist, you're reading their website and looking for the same keywords that you have written on your goal sheet or your value sheet, that will cut down on the time significantly. And, going through that. Also, the other thing that I had to do was shy away from going through other institutions and organizations, because I'd say, oh, I need help with this thing. And that particular institution would send me to a coach or a therapist that was in line with their values or belief systems. So to be very careful about approaching it in that perspective as well. It just requires so much self-empowerment from the beginning. And a lot of self-awareness in order for you to cut down on that time.
And that's the problem.
It's hard.
Yeah,
you don't have that self-awareness when you're there. It's like,
and you're depressed and you're anxious.
Yeah.
So how do you have the cognitive abilities to even think something like that? For me, it worked out great because I had a therapist that referred me to her therapist. And so, and he was the type of therapist I was looking for. And what you stated, Ava, I have a background because I have a master's degree in social work. I was in my social work program at the time. So I knew the different types of therapies that were out there, and I was looking for psychodynamic. And so that's what I got. I got a psychodynamic therapist. But the one thing that hit home for me, particularly working through my program and seeing people that want to be therapists, they don't work on their own stuff. And I would not go to a therapist who had not worked on their own stuff. And you'll know, because they'll be doing a lot of projecting. Yeah. Like they'll project what they want for themselves on you, or they're not listening to what your situation is. There's too much sometimes input as to what they think you should be doing and what you should be accomplishing. So for me, it was a referral, which was great, and my insurance happened to pay for it, so that was even better, But we're talking from a perspective of we were kind of wise in a way of what we wanted for ourselves. When a lot of our clients that come to Inception, they don't know what they want. Yeah. They're in that anxious mode, fight or flight, or they're in freeze. They can hardly, get out of bed. So how do we go about recommending or...
And I think that goes to what that one question that Charlamagne asked Michelle about her awakening. And this is starting to become a term that, I mean, I probably heard that term for a long time. If you've been in the spiritual self-help work, you've heard the term awakening.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, just from hearing that word, it's like many different levels of awakening.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
it's not
Right.
just, it's not
You
just
woke up.
just one level. It's like if you come out of the matrix, you understood even out of the matrix, Neo still was coming out of matrices, his belief system. And so when people come in, they haven't even had their awakening yet. You saw Chico and Vezzo when they came in. We saw the behind the scenes because a lot of it was edited, but behind the scenes, like you can tell, like one Chico fell asleep. And he said he had a hard time falling asleep with people in the room. So they're talking about the opening, like Inception as an opening. And I like to think of Inception as more just an opening because you can do more once you start to have a level of awareness because those tools in there, they're there and we can guide you, but there's deeper levels of using them. I mean, I've done over 60 different healing modalities and troubleshooting my own self and alternative and some non-alternative. But it's just layers and levels to it. So what is your thinking about, what's your thoughts about the whole idea of awakening and what was that? What was that even for you, I guess, the first time you had some type of awakening?
Well, I think there's as you said so well, I think there are layers. I think I started from experience. I had this very deep loss at 28 years old and lost my mom, lost a really big job for myself that I felt was a huge career thing for me. I got fired. And I was also in ministry at the time. And I was told by the pastor of the church that I was ministering at that I would never be a minister in his church again. So I literally, in like a 30-day period, so many anchors in my life were just kind of ripped out from under me. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was like pieces of my soul, literally just ripped away, that I had no reference point to anchor myself back to the ground again. And I went on a tailspin. I didn't know I was on a tailspin though. But my life and patterns in my life and decisions that I was making were becoming more and more incongruent. And that led to making decisions that I was like, why am I doing this? And eventually I got to this place where I realized I wasn't going to go to a pastor to talk about this. They couldn't help me. I didn't have any trust in a spiritual institution at this point. And then I suddenly found myself in front of a therapist who then led me to be a part of a men's retreat. And this was this gradual like unfolding, like, oh, that's what I'm in. I'm in this place of reckoning and I need to figure out how to get my feet back on the ground. So that was my start.
Yeah. I think my first one, I had, like we talked about, many different awakenings, but one actually happened a few, we'll say, weeks after I attempted suicide with my college, in front of my college roommates. And I remember after the whole thing happened, I kept thinking to myself, you were just doing that for attention. That's not how you're really feeling. But in the moment, when I went back to the moment, I was like, no, I wanted to leave. And a couple of weeks after that incident, I was walking through the hall getting ready to leave that particular dorm and move into another place. And I was like almost arrested in the middle of the hallway. It was like super dark. And there was just like this, like a mass or something that completely overwhelmed me. And I just fell to the floor. And I'd been out of the church then for some years. I hadn't really gone back since I graduated from high school. And the moment I hit the floor, the first thing that I looked for was the Holy Spirit. And I just started praying and crying and praying and crying. And I think maybe like 2 or 3 minutes later, the whole thing lifted and I got up and I started kind of moving around again. But I remember in that moment, my mind had kind of split. There was some part of me that was aware that there was something else bigger and let's say ineffable or like ethereal happening in my life. Some force was moving within me and on my behalf. And then there's this other part of me that was like, well, let's just keep packing these boxes and keep it moving. And I lived in that split state of mind pretty much up until the last 3 or 4 years of my life where my spiritual side was private and to me, and then there's this other side of me that was completely separate. But that awakening it never stopped. It didn't go away. It just kept unfolding and things kept happening. And it wasn't until a few years ago when I totally accepted it that I thought, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah, for me, surprisingly, I had an awakening when I was 12. I remember looking up at the sky and asking, why am I here? For a 12-year-old, you'd be like, why would you ask that? And when I look back, I don't know why I asked that. It was like something took over me, like there's a special purpose for you and just keep moving forward. And I never forgot that I was sitting on the front porch. And I remember that day looking up in the sky. And then the second time, I call it a shift, like there's a knowing. And you never go back to the way you thought. It's like something comes over you. The second time was when I was 30. I was 30 years old, and it was like there was another shift that took place. And then the third time, and there's been many shifts, but these are more pronounced, was during my cancer diagnosis when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, and that's been 30 years ago. That was a big awakening about the mind and body connection and how what I was feeling manifested in my body and what I was going through. Because after my cancer treatment, I read a book by Bernie Siegel, Dr. Bernie Siegel, Love, Something, and Healing. And he took you through the stages of what was going on in your life, what did it mean for you, and I got a better understanding of the mind-body connection. And my oncologist at the time from Sinai Grace, I went in one time and I was feeling vulnerable. And I said, what if? And he said, don't even think it. Your body can hear you. And that was during that time that I really understood that, you know what, I have more power than I knew, and that I need to pay attention more to my feelings and learn to start to be more authentic.
And during one of the segment parts, the questions was about, breaking curses. And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was talking about how he doesn't like to use the word break. And, Inception, we that terminology is used just because people understand it. But we use the term really as EPI, experience, process, and integrate. Because energy can never be created or destroyed, only transformed. So at every step of each level of awakening that you had, you freed up some energy, and you had to start to make the determination of what you were going to turn that energy to.
Right.
Because just having the awareness and awakening by itself, it don't do anything if you're making the same decision.
Right.
The awareness is one thing, and the ability to self-correct, that's a whole nother thing. But I found that by taking that energy and having an intention with it and being able to move from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth, you get more, and what he talked about, space. Because you've emptied that. You're not carrying that around. You know how we talk about people, you're carrying it on your back and on your shoulders. You got to let that go, bring it to the altar. What exactly are you talking about that we're carrying? You can look at it from a physiological perspective, what you're carrying, down to the electrical impulses within your nervous system and how you're, holding your jaw tight. And how your shoulders up to your ears, and why is your fist balled up right now, and why is your jaw tight? Again, it's like all that energy is really, when we talk about, to me, when we talk about stress and trauma, that's how we survive, but not when you're stuck and surviving. It's every day something.
Yeah, it's also. I love the physical characterizations of those, because those are those we internalize, right? I see also in the coaching space, I see people behaviorally acting out their trauma or drama cycles of like they don't want to take responsibility for themselves.
Right.
So they externalize all of that energy and recreate the very situations that they were often traumatized from. And it just becomes this cycle of, and it does become part of family cultures that, you know, I learn by arguing, or I feel really good when I have a good argument, or I feel really good when I punch a wall. And that becomes the expression of trauma, but no healing is taking place.
Or he loves me because he beats me because he loves me.
Exactly. Identifying love with the trauma because that was the context that we grew up in, and it's persistent and it's insidious in a way because it does feel like we're getting something of value from our energy, but it's actually still depleting us.
And it comes out too. It seeps out not just in your body, like it really manifests in your day-to-day life. I mean, you ever met someone? I knew somebody just always had flat tires, always having car trouble.
Yeah.
Like you really, you know, you have problems getting somewhere in your life, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's like those
That's a
things.
good analogy.
Literally.
Yeah.
Those things manifest outwardly, but they would never be able to think of it and like, no, that's too airy-fairy. But when you start getting down to the quantum world, and the spiritual world, which we talked about mind-body connection, and that's I think what we have to do is begin to bridge science and spirituality because they're the telescope, but a different lens. You're still looking through the telescope. You're just looking deeper into something. And the further you keep going down into it, guess what you see? The same shit over and over and over. But everybody else is trying to make it seem like it's something else. But that energy that you carry and that, you know, those things, man, they manifest. And I'm like, this person, they have and I don't want to even call it a dirty energy, but it's a very woe is me energy.
Yeah, it's a very specific frequency.
Life happens to me,
Yeah.
as opposed to I am happening in life. I have agency.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing they talked about too is creating safe spaces, you know, and I think that's something that we pride ourselves on at Inception is we've created a safe place. And you mentioned something about that when you came in. It's like, this is the futuristic, the way you worded it, I can't wait to hear it because it was on the news, but the way you worded it was so profound that I was sitting there in awe of how you described it.
Oh, the experience itself. Yeah, it's I've been playing a lot. Well, how do I say this? I've been over my life. I was raised in Orlando, between Orlando and Miami, and I had a lot of Disney experiences.
Are you from the islands?
No.
Okay.
That's just the British private school talking.
Okay.
Comes out sometimes, but yeah. And what I learned in that we would go a lot. My dad would take us, and what he would always show us is how it worked. Like, look, babe, look underneath the thing, and this is how this is working, and this is what's making you feel this way. And they're blowing the cookie scent from the bakery out from the parking lot through the vents so you can have this particular kind of experience. And my mother would get angry and she's like, oh, don't tell him that, you're going to ruin it. But for me, it made it more magical. And I've been trying to create those things in the projects that I've built for other people, but also been searching for those experiences for myself, because I think people who are looking for a space like Inception may be leaders in their own right, maybe, even if it's just at home or in the community, or maybe actually business leaders. And I think as leaders, we need more magic, right?
Yeah.
It's like that old school Bible thing when they would talk about in church, they'd be like, you know, God is over the man and the man is over the kids and da-da-da-da-da. And it's not so much about male or, you know, or woman. It's like when you're a leader, there's nobody else. Right, that God presence is your lean on. That is your shoulder to lean on. And I think having actual physical manifestations of that God presence, of that magic in life, helps leaders and people who are having a difficult time or who need that shoulder to lean on keep going. It's why it's so important. And so, like, to see a space like Inception just, you know, in Farmington Hills, I was like, okay.
And it's interesting you say that because my mom probably knows what I'm gonna say next because we're big Disney World people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like
for
we
sure.
want to go down because the level of detail, the magic is in the details.
Right.
And so from the moment you step through the door, you want an experience of sight, smell, what you hear, like, you know, just all those little nuances. Those things, it make it a safe place for people because they're like, you know what, you care about me because you put a lot of effort into this.
Yeah.
That's like if somebody cooked you some food and it was just like, these are all natural ingredients. This is amazing,
Right.
right? That's the thing, and for us, we like to hear that because we're like. We did that on a, little budget, and
just wait if we have some money.
Wait till we go to the next level.
You're going to the moon.
Right.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it is. That's what it is. It's about care, and because of that, I can't hardly get on a plane. I'm constantly having to check myself because I'm telling everybody what y'all need to do. You see, homegirl, how she, what y'all need to do is, the flow should go like this. The process should go like this. This needs to happen there. This color, this needs to be uplit. This needs to be downlit, And so I have to stop myself from doing that at every turn. But I think that it's just my way of interpreting care, like you were saying, and empathy for the people that we're serving, and to remember that when we're doing these things that we're being of service.
Yeah,
So-
I think we've become experience snobs.
We've been
honestly.
horrible together.
Experience snobs.
Every hotel,
know.
every space where we're being served. I heard somebody, I think it was Tom Peters years ago, In Search of Excellence was the book that he wrote. And he talked about this thing called the field of excellence. And I think when we talk about safe spaces, I think when we are creating a field of excellence, people feel like you know what you're doing, and that there's competency and credibility and a sense of I can be vulnerable here because it looks like they've taken care of all these things. I don't have to be mindful of these things. And when people can take their mind off of things, when they can become less hypervigilant, all of a sudden they're open.
Right.
And there's less resistance to the very thing that you're trying to create, which is healing. And that facilitates it. So it's like people don't hold excellence like they used to. You think about how we experience customer service nowadays and how many times it's like not exactly customer service. It's like you feel the disgruntlement or you feel resentment. Or
I feel let down a lot.
Oh, that's a great way of
Let
putting it.
down.
Yeah. You walk into a brand experience and you don't get that brand experience.
Right.
And you're like, wow, I didn't expect that. And then you lower your expectation the next time around. And I think societally we've done that. That not just, it's easy to say like the last 5 or 6 years we've been in
things
that,
have become I think it's two reasons for that. One, things have become very cookie cutter. I used to be, and my mom can attest to this, I was a dresser. I used to dress. You know that about me, right?
Of course.
Now you just see me in a sweatshirt and jeans, but I used to dress. My grandmother used to say, "Boy, you sharp," and I didn't know for years she was saying sharp.
Right.
First of all, she was saying sharp. I was like, I don't know what sharp is. But she said, "Boy, sharp, you sharp." I'm like, "Oh, sharp, okay."
Yeah.
But I used to dress to the T. That was me. That was the experience of David. I remember I had some little cufflinks that had little watches on them, like little things that made things pop. And now I want to tell that whole story because now if I go shopping, I'm not even interested.
I know.
All of the stuff looks, feels, nothing. Even at the art shows my mom used to go to back in the day, like she used to go to, what was it?
Ann Arbor.
And some of the pieces they got there was like, you can tell that piece, man, was like this person
Exquisite.
put some effort into it. I went to an art festival and I'm just like, it's too accessible to us now because we can get on Pinterest and Google and see
Etsy.
all of it, and it doesn't. So when you experience it,
It's flat.
you're on dopamine overload anyway.
Right.
So it's like the experience does not feel the same because you're on that dopamine overload. But I feel the exact same way, man. Like, like specifically around food.
Yeah.
I'm like, why everything tastes the same?
The two
Like,
of us at these restaurants, I think it's like, well, we've gotten really good. Now we just have a good eye. I'm like, okay, that one. Yes, that one. not definitely. We walked into one last night, and I was like, nope. I literally walked in, and I walked out. And I was like, I already know what this is going to be about, you know. And I think that that's just its own kind of, if you want to talk about it in those terms, its own kind of trauma. Like, people are so afraid to do anything anymore because they don't know what the reception or rejection is going to be, that they don't take those creative chances. And so we have a lot of people, whether you're talking about in politics or in social culture or even in art, just like recoiling and like pulling themselves back and not really expressing themselves truthfully because they don't want to deal with the backlash from doing so. And that's a whole nother, you know, soapbox I could stand on, but that's something else that we really need to pay attention to.
You know, we were talking earlier about the distinctions, and this is a slight pivot, but I think it's in the same vein around the distinctions between therapy and coaching. And part of this segues well in that the way we tee up something, the way we frame something is the way people, we hope, will experience it. And so when we talk about things like healing and modalities that access our healing mechanisms in our way of being, in our bodies, in our minds, then there needs to be some kind of a rubric that says there's an invitation here. So what is the invitation of therapy? What is the invitation of coaching? You know, and I think there's something around safety that is a part of both of those invitations. And there's also a degree of excellence. So you know, when you sit in front of a coach or someone who says they're a coach, and you hear them talking, and you pick up things about them that seem incongruent with what they're saying, their invitation gets off.
Right.
And you're kind of like, I don't know, I would never hire you as a coach, you know? You just have that going on in your head. Or I would never work with you as a therapist. There's something about you that doesn't seem like you actually practice what you preach.
It's kind of like the nurse at the hospital and they walk out and they smoke the cigarette.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
That's
It's
so
like,
blatant,
with
but
that,
yes.
it's like,
absolutely.
you're supposed to be
But I
taking
thought-
care of me, and you're not even taking care of yourself. How
Yeah,
are you taking care of me?
That's true.
And so I it's a simple rubric, but it's basically like if I get a sense that someone is not functioning, like they're not functional in their job, or they're not able to wake up in the morning, brush their teeth, take a shower, put on a fresh pair of clothes, and head out the door and go to work. And there's something that might be inhibiting just that simple level of functioning. They're operating 0 to a deficiency. And in that case, I see them as in need of therapy, not coaching. Like, if you can't get past your depression in order to function, or if you are functioning depressed in that depressed mode, and you know you're in that space, and yet you still keep pushing and pushing and pushing, you're almost burned out, then coaching is not the place to start. There needs to be a return to at least 0 functioning capacity in order for a coach to be able to say, okay, now we have something at least functionally to begin to work with to take you higher. But until you heal to get to that basic 0 space where you have the competency to grow.
Well, I think that's Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of need, and that's why Jesus always fed
the
people
people.
first. Like, we ain't gonna talk to you about spiritual stuff and your stomach hungry, your stomach growling, you know. But I know you had something to say about that.
You brought up a good point. Some years ago, when David first started the business, and so I used the analogy of, David, this is your baby. And when you grow, your baby's going to grow. Right now, your baby cannot feed you. It's in its infancy. And what we found is throughout the years, as we have grown developmentally, emotionally within ourselves, we can take our business up to the next level and the next level and the next level, because those resources are there now to meet the opportunities that the business brings us. If you're in a state of depression, you can have all the opportunities you want, but if you can't get out of bed or you can't focus, then you're not going to progress. Your business is not going to progress. So we have found that as the business gets bigger, we have to expand ourselves on the inside, and then the business will grow. I read a quote the other day. It said that happiness is not success. You don't make success let me back up. You don't become happy by being successful. You become successful by being happy. So if you start from the place of feeling good, then you can be able to take on those opportunities that come your way, because we have a lot of work to do in our business, right? And so we're always kind of gauging and trying to keep balance in our lives. How much energy do we need to put in the business today? Do we need to take a step back? What do we need to? David goes dancing, or
I think it's hard. It's hard for people who are anxious and who use the anxiety energy to go and accomplish things to work with us, because we're real in the flow of what we're doing. Could we be further along if we wanted to cut down a tree with a dull saw? Maybe, but there's a price to pay when you've done that. And I don't want to do all this building. My parents are getting older. It's times that I need to be spending with my life, not looking for the business to now I'm on this show, so I should feel better about myself, right? And you don't. So many people come to me, and when we had this conversation off camera, man, congratulations, I'm proud of you for what you done. And I'm just like, okay, what's the next level though? I'm not there. I'm not on the accolades of everything. That's cool. I appreciate it. I'm grateful. But I just need to be able to feel good right now. I don't need to wait till the next dopamine hit drops, because then I'm in the matrix.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in the success feel good matrix. The only way you get to feel good is when people see you as successful. That's prison.
It's a run. I talk about it a lot. And in my last business, I had a tech startup that also combined the spiritual advising or coaching for other business owners. And it was difficult because that wasn't my inherent first way of doing business. I wasn't a go get it. However, the state of mind that I was in, I'd attracted other mentors, clients, people who were. And so let's chill, let me get a drink of tea. I'm going to come into the office around 10 o'clock after my prayer and meditation, and then we'll get back to business. And my mentors were like, Ava, and they're going, and they're chasing this next high. And so, you get some positive feedback from that, and I actually switched tracks. And it's like the more that I followed them down that road, the less effective I became for my clients, the more burnt out I got. It was just a disaster. Like the entire business model kind of fell apart once I switched tracks. And so I ended up having to close everything down just to kind of get back to myself and remember, like, no, you had it right the first time. There was nothing wrong with the way that you were doing it before. The timing was different. It was like the peak of hustle culture, And so it was hard.
And all these spiritual practices and quotes and verses is all telling you about that. It's all telling you about things like gluttony. It's telling you about, life is about a journey and not a destination. And then you got stories in Hollywood that show you that life is a journey, not a destination, because the people who have everything, next you got Anthony Bourdain kills himself. You had quote unquote everything to us, but you didn't have a feeling in your body to even want to stay here. And that's the thing, because there's only one thing that makes up your life, and that's your life. It's your own body. If you can't feel in your body, of course. Or if you're overfeeling, like you said earlier, you talked about mention to suicide. And I think a lot of people, because Michelle Williams was talking about that's how she had her awakening, when she had more thoughts of suicide than not. And it's like, that's not an abnormal thing. And you have to really quantify what suicide really is from a layman's perspective. Because to me, it's just, at the end of the day, is you don't feel good.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get out of pain.
Yeah. And for me, I kept saying it was weird. Like for years, I kept saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. And I didn't know what that meant. Like I just kept telling people I want to go home. And like, where is home? I was like, I don't know. It's the stars or something. I just want to go home. But that feeling of home, I gained eventually within myself.
Right.
But that was a very deeply spiritual connection that I had that gave me that sense of stability for myself. But I couldn't get it earlier. I didn't know. And it wasn't until I met the right teachers to kind of help me with that vocabulary to make it make sense.
I think there's an element of, well, I think it's an emergence right now of healed healers as opposed to a flock of wounded healers. Like so many of our career choices are driven by our pain.
Right.
You know, we go into a particular line of work because we need healing. So I become a coach. You know,
And I become a social worker.
yeah, right.
And I open in Inception.
And then we realize like there's an opening, and we're like, oh, that's why I got into this field.
Right.
And so then you start doing your own work. And in my own journey of doing my own exploration, I had to get to this place of like, there is a point where I can't work with this. I know I can't work with this particular person because I have not confronted that in me. And until I do, I have to say no to this person. I have to refer them to this person or that therapist or whatever. I cannot compromise my integrity by working with somebody on something that I have not worked with.
That was like Wayne Dyer. You know, Wayne Dyer, you know, he had all that wisdom, man. And he was like, yeah, don't ask me about relationships. You know, he had like 6 wives, whatever. And he was very authentic about it. And he's a funny guy, too. He's like, well, don't ask me about that. Like, you know, I can't help you there.
I mentioned that one time, which was really surprising, too. Somebody asked her, like, how do you get through relationships? She's like, I don't know. I'm on my third one. I do not know.
Who said that now?
Yana Van Zandt.
Oh,
I think
okay.
one of them. It was hilarious. It kind of shocked me. I was like, okay.
Yeah, but that I
You
think
know?
that's very powerful when you have the you know, the vulnerability, and it's just like, yo, I don't listen. I haven't, like you said, I haven't got past that part of the game yet. I'm still dodging bullets. I ain't stopped them yet.
Right.
Okay. Just give me an opportunity to get to that point. You know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have a level of integrity to not. Yeah, I'm gonna be your financial advisor, and like you got a pot to piss in and what to throw it out of.
You went there. All right.
That's grandma talking. Yeah. You remember that phrase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
that's the
something
thing.
Kevin said about home, and that was one of the things when I went through my therapy that I learned that home was inside of me. And wherever I am, I'm at home. And that gave me such a sense of freedom because then I realized home wasn't necessarily an external place that I had to keep looking for, and that it was inside of me. And that was a big shift for me, like, wow. But imagine some people's homes are messed up. Yeah. They're like, oh, no, I don't like this home inside of me. Like, I'm trying to run away from this. But once you can clear out all of that, the barriers, the negative energy, the fear, the self-loathing, the bullying thoughts, the menacing thoughts. Along the way in therapy, I made a different home for myself. And I've said this to David many a times and to his sister too, that I feel that one of the things that we do as adults is we find our home inside of us and we find our mother and father inside of us. Because, you know, our physical mother and father are going to leave us. But if you find that warrior and that nurturer in that place of home inside of you, I'm telling you, I call that my sweet spot because you find yourself.
Yeah.
And
beautiful.
So, you know, any relationship that you're in, you bring that to the relationship instead of your trauma patterns and your drama. You know, you bring that. And so that's what you... that's when you can have better types of relationships, more loving relationships, because you're not looking for that person to provide a home for you. You're not looking for that person to be the warrior or the nurturer. You know, you can do that for yourself. So I say, I'm the cake, I'm the vanilla, I'm the sugar, I'm the butter, I'm the eggs. You can bring the sprinkles and the sugar, the icing. But I can have cake without icing. I can be a pound cake, and I can be just good.
Yeah.
You said something about too, like healers starting to heal, and I want to know from all of you, like as you found yourself being more home, not whole, but being more home at home. At some point, you don't have the desire to do the same thing. I know that Inception had to grow because I couldn't continue doing it the same way. Because I was the person behind the counter for everybody who walked through that door for years. And I can't do that at the same level. Because if I did, I'd be done. You know, so now you see more automation.
Yeah.
And it allows me to still do the work that I'm here to do, but not be so consumed with it. Because once again, like I think you told me a story of a guy who was a therapist for years, and after he really healed himself, he was like, I want to go do music.
Yep.
Yeah, he was actually trying to work on some. He was a doctor that worked on some technique that he was harmed or injured as a child, and when he went to therapy, and he found out that is why he became a doctor. He didn't want to do that anymore, and so, but his mentor said, "You're like one in three people in the world that can do this technique. Now that you know this, can you teach others?" Because he didn't want to do the technique anymore, but he taught others.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's so. How are you at those levels? Where are you at in those levels?
I think for me, I was able to, the component that I kept trying to add into my healing modality, let's say, was technology, and especially things around coding and things like that. And at the time, the part that was rather unhealed with me was my need to prove to people that I was smart. So I grew up my whole life, and I always wanted to be in like tech and sciences and things like that. But they were like, hey, you're not good at math. Like I have a legitimate math disability at a particular level. And so they kept telling me you can't do it. And so as an adult, I'm like, I'm going to code camp. I'm doing this. I'm going to save my community. I got all this funding from these, organizations to do this work. And I got to the point even after I let the business go that I was like, I don't have to prove that to anybody anymore. And because I was able to let that component go, I was able to kind of surrender to the other side of it, which is even less about helping other people heal, but it's more about giving them a space to do their own work, right? So I can remove myself, the need to prove something to myself, whether it's healing or building a website or whatever, saving community, whatever it is. I can now remove myself from that process. I certainly enjoy the advising role. And it's something that gives me a sense of peace, but it isn't something that I now have to have my hands in.
Yeah.
Right? And so that for me has been, it's opened me up a lot to so many other possibilities. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all this other fun stuff that I can do instead of holding someone's hand through their business or through their relationship life all the time, and just allowing them, giving them the space and giving them the tools and stepping back and saying, here's what I think the issue is. Here's kind of where I think you are and the factors affecting that. Here are some resources for that.
Yeah.
And done, Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, after being in the field for over 20 years and doing a lot of one-to-one talking with people and helping them work through issues and all that stuff, I'm feeling a shift away from that same mode of proving myself, because a black man in the coaching industry was pretty rare for a large chunk of my career.
So it's like you and what's Anthony Robbins' homeboy name? The other
Right,
black guy.
right.
And you were like, how did that one black guy get up there with Anthony
McClendon? Yeah.
Did you ever think that? Like how?
I have
Anthony,
often wondered. Yeah.
Anthony is here he's like the father of coaching, right?
Yeah.
And so when you saw McClendon, you like, outside of Les Brown,
Right. Yeah.
Who was more motivational?
who's more
speaking.
motivational, is
Right.
not coaching.
Yeah.
So when you go to McClendon, it was like, how did that brother get there? So it's like, so when you see people,
So I'm at this place. I had this really heavy insight, heavy for me, while I was doing my retreat in Costa Rica around pride and how much pride drove me in my career. In a way, it kind of kept me afloat when my esteem was low and I didn't see many other people of color in the industry. And I think that this statement, pride is a constraint, hit me at some point during that retreat. That pride has its functionality, and then it has this downturn of value creation. And I realized that I was on this downturn side of it. Like I can't ride that as a buoy anymore. And releasing that was a point of healing for me. That I didn't have to have this thing on my chest or chip on my shoulder about being whatever I was in my field, that I could actually just be myself now and not worry about proving anything. And with that came this weird onset. Like, I've been talking to Ava about scripts that I've had ideas for, and just
being creative,
doing piano.
You could just be
picking
creative
up,
now.
Singing, just all kinds of different things that open up things. And I think shifting more into a role as an elder within the coaching community for other BIPOC coaches that are emerging, and new talent, and people who have, great insight at age 25, 26, 27, and, stuff that I wasn't even exposed to at their age. And being able to share my experience with them and focusing more on communities as opposed to communities of coaches, communities of healers, as opposed to one-on-one work. So it's a shift, and I'm moving in that direction.
And for me, this is really interesting. When I started in the field of social work, I started with working with children that were pre-K. And I was in my therapy sessions during that time, too. And as I progressed developmentally, they say hindsight is 20/20. I look back, I went from pre-K, then I was with elementary school kids, and then I had middle school kids, and then I had high school kids, and then I taught at the college level. And then David got me and said, "You're done with that." And I was done with it. I was like, I'm done with this. It was like I had grown through all those developmental stages during my therapy. Remember, I said that I, laid a new foundation for myself. So working with those children also helped me work through what I needed to work through. So I ended up being faculty at an online college, and then I started working, as a businesswoman, which took me years to even say that word. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, really? That's what I am. Like, we know that's my title. That's just a title. But I've grown into this role now of feeling more proficient, efficient, like finding your home, finding your parents inside of you. It's like it was a really great journey to growth. And so now it's like, I was telling David, I was like, so what do I do now? I don't know what to do. And I feel like I'm in this gray point of I want to help people, but it's not the same way that I wanted to help them in the past. I release them and let them go, and they can heal or not. And I'm okay with it.
It took me a second to get to that point, because you become very enmeshed with your clients in the beginning because you're trying to heal yourself, and you think you want healing for them more than they want it, but really you want healing for you.
Yourself.
You're just hoping that, well, if you get healed from me helping you heal, then I'm going to feel better. Something funny how we couple those things together. But, after a while, I got to the place, I was taking home clients' ailments and stuff. My stomach hurts, or this hurts, or a client would come in and I would ask them, well, how do you feel? Well, I feel more anxious, and I would feel, what's the word? I wouldn't feel like, I felt like fraudulent, because I felt like, well, I'm supposed to help you not feel anxiety, and you feeling anxiety, and you feeling depression. But along the way of my own journey and understanding, no, those emotions, you're going to have to feel them, sir. And so you start feeling them, and then your client comes in and they're like, I got anxiety. And I'm like, good.
Yes.
Breathe through it.
It's more of a detached feeling.
You're
now.
more detached from it.
But it's not, it's a loving detached. You're not like, well, I'm just detached from you. It's like, no, I'm detached. You can be in your space and I can be in my space and I'm okay over here with you being okay over there,
Yeah.
you know, with your journey.
So
Just
that's
like-
the part I
yeah.
was saying. You get to the place where you just like, all right, whoever comes through that door, you are where you are. And here are the tools, but I am not codependent on whether you're going to heal or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
You know,
freedom.
And that, yeah.
No
That's-
hooks.
That's it.
No hooks
Yeah,
on
no
the
hooks.
outcome.
No hooks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, you know, my sense of myself isn't wrapped in my career, and my career success or failure isn't wrapped in your success or failure.
Yes.
Like, that's what kept getting me. I was like, if this, like you said, if this person doesn't get it like this, then I haven't done my job, which means that I can't proclaim that I'm this or that. It's
Right.
like, nope, you're just a facilitator anyway, friend. You weren't even supposed to be that involved in the beginning, right? Like, you're
Right.
there to help them move through this. This person is just as empowered as you are, right? So you go there, you do what you're supposed to do. You're in that companionship and in an appropriately collaborative space with this person, and then you let it go.
That's a good point you brought up, because I asked one of the professors when I was going through my master's degree in social work, and I asked him, well, what if I make it worse? And he just laughed. He says, honey, you're not going to make it worse. Nothing you could do is going to make it worse. And I really didn't understand that. I'm like, well, what if I say something and what if, you know? And because I'm thinking I got all this control over them and, you know, I can make them feel better. And it took me years to understand what he meant. Like, they're in their own stuff and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, it's freeing for everybody. I think it's a very lovely feeling when you can do that. I mean, now the new thing for me has come up that I need to make sure that I set that expectation with the clients. You know, in the beginning, we call them in the priestess temple that I'm in. It's sacred agreements, which is something that you set up with anyone. But just letting people know, like, hey, look. This is your responsibility. This is my responsibility. These are your goals. These are my goals. This is where we're going to move this thing to. And, you know, and letting them know where they go. Because, I mean, especially for a lot of my clients, they expect answers and instant, you know, like, what's going to happen for me? And I need, you know, this right now. And I'm like, you want to know a secret? Even if I tell you the exact future, it's not going to change it, and you're not going to like it anyway. So it's like, you know.
I think that that Karate Kid movie, you know, really taught you process, because he's there to learn in his mind karate, but Mr. Miyagi is not only teaching you life skills, he's also teaching you what you want. It just doesn't look like what you want. But the outcome is going to be more than what you ever could expect. And so as people come into Inception, we have this whole jumpstart guide, and we starting to really train people to understand that, you know, like you said, this is your responsibility. We've done all the work to get you and support your brain, your body into the healing process. But that's just what it is. It's us supporting you and you supporting yourself, not us being your healer, not us being the man behind the curtain, and not us being, you know, the Wizard of Oz. It's like, no, any leader, coach, pastor, teacher, if they're taking you away from you, then they're taking you away from you. Like, we're trying to point you to the inward part. So even as that show that we watch, you know, everybody's like, well, what's the next steps? And we just kind of detailed, man, you put all these pieces together, it goes back to that thing. It's a journey. So don't come to Inception or Arrhythmia or Elysium or wherever and think that like this linear process of healing, because we've been conditioned about healing from biblical standpoints too, where we think about spontaneous remissions. And those things do happen. But if you look at most of our ailments and diseases and mental emotional issues, those things happen underneath the surface by a process.
For years.
But then you want to run to the therapist, Inception, the coach, the advisor, and you want instant transmission. But if it transformed like that quickly, you probably die.
Right.
Probably
And they
dead.
don't want to do the work. See, they want
Or you come
somebody
right
else
back
to
to
do
it.
the
Or
work.
you come right back to
and,
it.
Yes.
and find yourself right back in the same condition because you haven't thought about your mindset changes that need to support the change. I mean, if you get healed of cancer and you got cancer because you smoked 50
Yeah.
years of your life, but you don't know how to stop smoking,
Right.
then you could be healed, but in 5 years, you might have lung cancer all over again.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's just a small sample of it, but so many other ways in which we have these microaggressions against ourselves that are traumas that we perpetuate against ourselves. And we want them to be healed, but we're not willing to do the work on those small things that actually facilitate healing over a long period of time.
And so that's a good statement too, because me and my mom talked about the process. We were talking about, man, if you start looking at all the pieces of the puzzles for the last 30 years of your life and how you got to one step to the next, if you remove one domino from that process, you don't get to be who you are and where you are right now.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a an ongoing process, and that's what Charlamagne asked. How do you know when you're healed? And I can't remember their response, but I'll tell you, somebody who a body worker who I've been working with, she said, you know when the healing work is done? I said, no, when? She says, when it's done, you got about 20 minutes left to live. So this idea of when am I healed? Well, you just ate something that your body has to go process right now. There's E. coli and staph and all type of stuff in your body right now that you don't even know is there. It's just not overtaking you because your system is constantly working behind the scenes. So this concept of healing, of heal my trauma, again, it's still airy-fairy. Like, how do I really touch it? And it's just like, this is process of converting energy for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be stressors. There's always going to be traumas. But how do you take that energy in? And just like when you go to the gym and you put on 100 and 200 pounds and you bench press that, the body has to make a determination that, you know what, we need to grow and get bigger next time. So when we come lift this, it's the same thing with our healing life journey. It's like the bumps and bruises you take, how you're able to convert and heal from that is going to determine if you're able to adapt and continue moving forward.
Yeah, entirely. And I look at it as, we were talking about this earlier, as an upward spiral. That at some level, we experience trauma, boom, age 10. And then we get to age 15, it's triggered in different ways. Age 20, triggered in different ways. We start doing some healing work. It triggers us less, but we come back around to it again at age 30 because we're in a different environment and someone says something and it triggers us again. So it's still there. It's a part of who we are. And it in a way, the person, the doctor was right. It becomes a part of our personality that we have to confront on a regular basis. It may not be as dominant over time. It may not prevail over our way of being, but it's something that we know is a part of our life, that as we progress, as we know more, as we learn more, as we do more healing work, we come back around to it and it may show up in real small ways. And we may be thinking during the conversation, ooh, I felt that. But it doesn't hurt as much as it used to.
And I think it depends on your level of self-awareness. Take, for example, a kid that has been neglected, right? And they grow up and they become an adult and they get in relationships and they may be triggered like this person is neglecting me. They're not paying attention to me. They're not listening to me. And so that could be another trigger. But what you said was that it can go on for, different developmental stages in your life, which is true. And I think that one of the key things for me has been being aware of it. Like this is this thing that pushes my buttons. And is this situation one of those times when it's doing it, and what do I need to do to take care of myself?
Yeah.
So when we talk about being healed, people want to be healed.
Well, that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah,
that's,
it's like...
that's
Right.
conditioned from the church. I'm telling
Yeah.
you that when we hear that, like, go to Benny Hinn and
Erase it.
get your hands
Yeah.
laid on you and you're healed. And it's like, but I've been to Benny Hinn's things and I saw people going in on stretchers and coming out on them same stretchers. So,
Yeah.
that concept is like, I'm not saying that doesn't exist because we've seen that. People have experienced spontaneous healings, but
you're talking about a disease, right?
no. Because I think that you're still going to make that association that, well, if you heal my broken arm, well, you can heal my broken mind too.
But there's so many layers of that. Like, how
Yeah.
do you tease out you were damaged in this area and damaged in that area, damaged? You know, the healing is like, could be multifaceted. And what area of your life are you talking about being healed?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody wants it now, you know, at the mental level, even the physical level, the spiritual level. They're just like, you know, they want it right now. I mean, I know, you know, for me, I deal with people, especially women in relationships, which I just find this in a million years, I would have not imagined that I would be here in my life today doing this kind of work. But, you know, women come to me and, you know, they ask a lot of questions about the other person in the relationship because their idea of healing is the perfect marriage. And so they come to me and, is he going to come back? When's this going to happen? And I'm like, well, you have to work on this aspect of yourself and this aspect of yourself because even if he comes back, you won't be ready to hold the love of that relationship because you have other traumas, right? And I think even for myself in that healing, it's like I'm so accustomed to being in relationships, no matter even if it's love or whatever, of having these relationships kind of explode or implode on me. And so I developed anxiety over the years. And for me, I don't want to say I've been completely healed, but my version of healing is now taking that anxiety and making use of it. So when it hits me and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, my spidey senses are going off about a circumstance, whether it's in business or friendship or in love, this is what I'm sensing and saying, hey, this isn't an anxiety. It's actually a really good sense. You see something over here, go address it. Look at it, talk about it, think it through, put some things in place. And then once that's done and resolved, you can move forward, right? And that's taking and transmuting that energy rather than allowing it to run my life, you know, and constantly living in fear and jumping in and out of situations and like hunkering down. And I mean, for me, it's like I said, less about healing and more about like taking it and using it for something.
Yeah.
Useful.
And that's the tools that you're referring to. Like, do you have the requisite skill to manage the emotional cues that we get from trauma or trauma triggers to then harness that and use that information wisely as opposed to being reactive? You can be creative as those triggers arise. And then they're no longer controlling us as a reactive force, but we are harnessing them in a way of relating more effectively. And it's also a point of vulnerability, because if I can say,
Right.
you know what you just said really triggered me, but I know it's not you. So I'm just going to have to take a moment here and process what you just said. That helps the other person then relate to me more.
That helps them too, but it also it whatever is observed changes.
Yes.
So having the level of awareness to see that is the power to begin with. Like I said, like, because now you can actually, so the space between stimulus and response, as Stephen Covey talks about, stimulus and response, instead of just going to that knee-jerk reaction, I have enough space and awareness to see my programming happening in real time and step back and say, you know what? Because this is what our brain training does. It gives you these skips, pauses, and interrupts and lets you know what your brain did in its last time. And it's like, you know what, Kev, do you really want to do that? So when you feel that trigger, that's the stimulus. And now you have the space enough to be able to say, you know what? This is what happened. But this is the power, because now I have the awareness and the ability to do something with it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think people, they get stuck at just the spot where you got some space, but then you wouldn't have filled it up with more junk. And now you lost your resources again.
Yeah.
So that goes down to that question too, when they were saying there's a difference between therapy and healing. You remember when they said that? When they talked about that? What was your thoughts on that?
Well, healing, it's all a journey. And when you go into therapy, for me, it just allowed a process for me to get a better understanding, or a safe place for me to raise my level of awareness. That's what therapy was for me, for someone to be in a space and hold that space where I felt safe and heard and not judged. So I can process my thoughts to that person in the room. You know, it was for me, it wasn't for them. So the healing, I think, what we're saying is much more key than healing. It's you learning how to be in the present moment and knowing, having a level of awareness of, I remember feeling afraid. And I stepped back from myself. And that's a very powerful thing that if you can do that and say, I have this fear of thought. What is this fear of thought about? I feel this fear in my stomach. What do I want to do with this feeling? And it was something business relating. Is this real?
Mm-hmm.
Is this really a boogeyman at my door? No. So I have this feeling of fear. What do I want to do with it? And I have some techniques that I do to reduce that level of fear. When people say they want to be healed, they're saying, I don't want to do the work. The healing is in doing the work consistently all the time for the rest of your life until you're 20 minutes away from being dead.
Yeah.
That's where the power lies in. Healing is a future thing. I want to be healed. If you hear that, that's like, I want to be healed. That's a future thing. And somebody doing something to you. It's you are healing yourself by doing the work in the present moment of saying, this thought is not, I've been programmed to think. We had a worker whose mother told her, you're a piece of shit and you deserve to die. Mm. And so she had these thoughts running, and so she would attract situations or whatever. For her, the healing would be knowing that's not true. At this moment, I'm feeling that. What do I need to do about that? This person is not good in my life. I need to make a shift. So when we say that healing, it's like, I just want it all to be taken away. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to do the work. And we are so multifaceted and so many levels to us. Then to be healed is to die.
It is a way. It is yeah. Because I mean, you could have a terminal sickness, and death is healing in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
you're nothing but light at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You out of disease.
I don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
I just want to. You're healing. You are healing yourself. It's not something that you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think you're tapping into something really important here, and that's that our human beings are designed to heal themselves when given the right environment to do so. Mm-hmm. So we talked about safe spaces, and we talked about environments of excellence, and we talked about creating environments where that work can be done, whether that be therapy or coaching or the brain training or technology that equips and enables that healing. Well, to me, the therapy is akin to weightlifting. Like you say, you want to be strong, but you don't want to go lift weights. How are you going to do that? I mean, you could just imagine yourself lifting weights. And I think Bruce Lee had some kind of methodology where he just kind of tensed up his muscles and eventually, but that was work too. Mm-hmm. He still created the tension.
He had to do something.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I think the therapy is whatever modality we invest in to create the necessary tension.
It's just the vehicle.
Yeah, it's the tension that we create in our development, whatever that needs to be, and then the rest that we give ourselves so that our body and our mind can do that work.
Yeah,
right.
That we can't consciously do because we don't. I mean, nobody's mentally healing their muscle fibers between workouts. It's not. We don't consciously do that, but yet. That is what's healing and making us stronger. So I think there's a part where we are invested and a part where we let go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a stimulus response loop that we live in, and so you got what's called hormetic responses. Like there's a hormetic response to sitting in a infrared sauna. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a hormetic response to obviously cold exposure. Mm-hmm. The body's trying to adapt. And when you give it to it in doses, the body can take those doses and process and integrate. Black people problem is with the doses that we've been given is too big of a dose. Mm-hmm. And so either we got too much stimulus coming at us and the inability to process and integrate, but now we're going into a culture where there is not as much stimulus, and a lot of it is based on, well, you know, we talked about cancel culture, and it's the offense, you know, and my nervous system can't take, can't
the
handle
rejection
that.
of those processes. Yeah.
So it's like it's twofold. Either you got too much or you got too little. But you need you need enough, and you still need the recipe of summer, fall, spring. You know, well, what I say, summer, fall, winter, spring. That's the whole cycle, and we go against that. Yep. That's our cycle, though.
Summer all the time, baby. All day, every day, summer. Just like, and it was like, no, that's not.
If it was like that all the time, our hearts would burn out. We'd die.
Yeah.
From that constant stimulus of the sun. I mean, because anywhere you go on the planet, I lived in Miami for 6 years. Even in the winter, even though it's still warm, that sun ain't hitting you like it's the summer.
It's rainy,
it's a different level. It's a different level of stimulus, and we have not learned how to go with the flow, because we're going into. I told y'all we're going into busy season.
Yeah.
How is it busy season when the winter is saying slow down and rest? It's because we're programmed this way to go against nature, and as the healers of ourselves and working with other people to become healers of ourselves, it's important to get people in the natural track of life. So as we watch that whole show, and, you know, they're going through their first journey, it's like this whole conversation is about that natural flow. And when people ask, well, after Inception, what do you do? It's like, keep going.
Right.
That's the real answer. It's not about finding the therapist. No, just keep going in your healing journey, and how that's going to look like and how that's going to unfold for you is going to be way different than it was for each and every one of us.
That's correct.
You know, some people coaching, it may be, some people spiritual advising, some people social worker therapy, some people Inception.
Maybe a
some people combination of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, it's all about just keep going. So if you keep going and you keep doing the inner work, then that's what's going to enrich your life, and not waiting for some big payoff at the end of your life. It's enriching it as
in the meantime,
along the way.
Along the way.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
All right, everyone. Till next time.
You've been listening to the Inner Wealth Podcast on EYL.
Get out the matrix and live.
Theme song produced by Be Ready for West Coast Creations. I am Razcast, reminding you to take action, be proactive, be congruent. Get out of the matrix, get your mind right. We've automated mental health at Inception. Join the movement. Inner Wealth Podcast. Inner Wealth Podcast. Inner Wealth Podcast.
Get out the matrix and live.